The road stretched ahead of me like a black ribbon pulled too tight, the faint glow of my headlights cutting through the mist that clung to the trees. The dashboard clock blinked 11:47 p.m., far too late to still be driving in circles just to avoid going home. The argument with Emily had ended the way most did these days. Quiet, bitter, unfinished. Something about forgotten groceries, the tone I used, the way I'd shut down when she tried to talk. But it wasn't about groceries. It was never about groceries. It was about everything that had been missing for months. The laughter, the warmth, the simple want to be near each other. The radio hummed with static between stations. I let it fill the silence. I told myself I was cooling off, that I just needed air. In truth, I was running from the house, from her disappointment, from the feeling that I was living someone else's life. The hum of the tires was hypnotic until blue and red light erupted behind me, flashing through the rearview mirror like a pulse of judgment. My heart jumped. I eased the car onto the gravel shoulder, the crunch of stone under the tires loud in the stillness. My breath came shallow. For a moment I considered how absurd it was, me, a man who paid every bill on time, being nervous about a traffic stop. But it wasn't fear of the law that made my hands shake. It was fear of being seen, really seen. A door slammed behind me. Footsteps approached. "Evening," a voice said, deep, steady, threaded with authority. "License and registration, please." I rolled down the window and looked up. The beam of a flashlight hit my chest first, then my face. Behind it stood Officer Cole Matthews, his uniform crisp even in the humidity, the brim of his hat shadowing sharp eyes. He wasn't much older than me, mid-30s maybe, but carried himself like someone who'd seen enough of the world to stop flinching at it. "Do you know how fast you were going?" Cleared my throat. Not exactly. I didn't think." He tilted his head. "Clocked you at 58 in a 40. I exhaled. "Sorry. Long night. Step out of the vehicle, please." The words hit like a command and a test all at once. My body moved before my mind caught up. I opened the door, the night air cold and damp against my face. "Hands on the wall," he said, motioning toward the brick retaining wall that bordered the service road. Something in his tone made it impossible to argue. The wall was cool under my palms, rough with chipped paint. Gravel crunched as he stepped closer. The sound of his radio crackled faintly, dispatch murmuring static. Then silence. I could feel him near me, the heat of another presence in the empty dark. My pulse pounded in my throat. He spoke again, voice low but even. "You been drinking tonight, sir?" "No, sir." "Drugs? Anything I should know about?" "No." His flashlight swept over the car, then back toward me. "Mind if I check?" I nodded. "Go ahead." He did a quick inspection, professional, detached, and yet every second stretched. I could hear my own breathing, the soft rhythm of his boots on the pavement. When he came back, he stopped just behind me. I could feel the weight of his gaze, even without turning around. "Rough night?" he asked quietly. I hesitated, still facing the wall. "Something like that." He waited, not for an excuse, but an answer I couldn't give. I turned slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. They weren't hard like I expected, they were curious, almost kind. He nodded once, as if that was enough truth for tonight. "I'll let you off with a warning. Drive slow on these back roads. Deer come out of nowhere." I blinked. That's it. That's it." He handed back my license. Our fingers brushed. Barely a second, but my chest tightened like I'd touched a live wire. I thanked him, a whisper, and he simply said, "Get home safe, Ryan." The way he said my name, flat on paper, alive in his voice, lodged somewhere deep in me. I got back in the car, shutting the door softly. The mirror caught his reflection as he walked back to his cruiser, the red and blue lights still painting the night. I sat there even after he pulled away, hands gripping the steering wheel. My skin still buzzed where his voice had touched it. I didn't understand the feeling. It wasn't attraction exactly, not yet. More like recognition, the way lightning recognizes the sky before it strikes. The drive home was slower, almost cautious. The argument with Emily replayed in fragments, but it felt distant now, like someone else's memory. All I could see was that moment, his shadow beside me, the stillness between words. When I reached the house, the lights inside were off. The porch bulb flickered once and died. I sat in the parked car for a long time, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. My hands were still shaking, not from fear, from something I didn't have a name for yet. That night, I thought I'd just been pulled over. I didn't realize I'd been stopped for something far deeper. The next few days blurred together. Work, commutes, polite small talk with coworkers. All of it felt like a movie I'd already seen too many times. I kept replaying that night instead. The way his flashlight beam had framed the rain. The low hum of his voice when he'd said my name. I told myself it was just the adrenaline, the embarrassment of being pulled over. But some part of me knew that wasn't the truth. By Friday morning, I'd convinced myself I was over it, until I walked into May's Diner on Main Street. The bell over the door chimed, and the smell of coffee and buttered toast wrapped around me. The morning crowd was thin, a couple of truckers, a family with kids. I slid into a booth near the window, ordered my usual black coffee, and tried to focus on my phone. That's when I saw him, Officer Matthews. He was sitting alone at the counter, no hat, just the navy uniform and the same calm posture. He was talking quietly to the waitress, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. For a second, I froze. Every reasonable part of me said to keep my head down, pretend not to see him. But when he turned, his eyes found mine as if he'd been expecting it. He gave a small nod. I returned it, awkwardly, pretending to study the menu I'd already memorized years ago. My pulse quickened anyway. When he finished his meal, he paid, then paused by my booth. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I echoed, voice softer than I meant. "You're driving slower these days?" His tone was teasing, almost playful. I smiled. "Trying to." He tilted his head slightly. "Good. Be a shame if I had to pull you over again." There was a flicker in his eyes. Amusement, maybe something else. Couldn't tell. He shifted his weight, thumb hooking behind his belt, but his voice softened. "You doing better now? You looked worn out the other night." That word, "you looked," felt too observant, too personal. I nodded. "Rough patch. But yeah, better." He studied me for a moment, as if testing the truth of it. Then, "All right, take care of yourself, Ryan." And he was gone, the doorbell chiming as he stepped into daylight. I sat there for a long time, staring at the swirl in my coffee, trying to understand why a simple conversation felt like my pulse had been rewired. Over the next week, I saw him again, and again. At first, it seemed like coincidence. The town was small, everyone ran into everyone eventually. But soon it started to feel deliberate, or maybe fate just had a cruel sense of humor. Once on my morning commute, he was directing traffic near the school zone, reflective vest catching the sun. Another time, I spotted his patrol car parked near the grocery store. He nodded through the windshield. Each time, I felt the same flutter of something I didn't have words for. Meanwhile, things at home were unraveling. Emily had grown distant, colder, sharper. Every conversation turned into an argument or worse, silence. I tried to fix things, suggested dinners, weekends away, but she looked at me like I was a stranger sitting in her kitchen. One night, while folding laundry, she asked without looking up, "Is there someone else?" The question hit me like a slap. I almost laughed from shock. "What? No." She met my eyes finally. "You're somewhere else every night, Ryan. Even when you're sitting right here." I didn't answer because she was right, but not in the way she thought. There wasn't someone else. There was something else. A thought I couldn't shake. A feeling I couldn't explain. That night, I dreamed of blue lights flickering across my skin, of a voice whispering my name in the dark. I woke up sweating, my chest tight with guilt. The following Saturday, my firm hosted a small community fundraiser for local services. Fire, police, animal shelter, the usual civic duty stuff. I helped with setup at the recreation hall, arranging banners and donation boxes. I was kneeling to tape a sign when a voice behind me said, "Need a hand with that?" I turned. Cole stood there in a gray t-shirt, off duty this time, sleeves rolled up. The muscles in his arms were lean, defined, but what caught me was the easy smile, the kind that softened everything else about him. I swallowed. "Hey, you volunteering too?" He shrugged. "They said they needed extra help. Guess I can lift things better than I can bake." We both laughed, light, nervous. The sound echoed off the gym walls. We worked side by side, setting up folding chairs and tables. Every time our hands brushed over a shared piece of tape or a sign, my chest tightened. At one point, a box slipped from my hands. He caught it before it hit the floor, reflexes quick. His hand steadied mine, his fingers closing briefly over my wrist. The contact was nothing, barely a second, but it sent a spark all the way to my throat. He noticed, of course. His jaw tightened, and he stepped back immediately, pretending to adjust the box. "Careful," he said, tone steady again. "Wouldn't want a workplace injury at a charity event." I laughed it off, though my voice cracked halfway through. By the end of the day, we'd fallen into an easy rhythm. Passing tools, sharing quiet jokes, acting like two men who hadn't been circling each other in silence for weeks. When the event wrapped up, he lingered by the door as I packed up supplies. "Guess I'll see you around," he said. "Seems like we always do." That earned a small smile, tired, knowing. As he turned to leave, I caught myself watching the way the sunlight hit his shoulders through the window. It was wrong, every part of it. But I couldn't stop. That evening, Emily mentioned she'd heard I'd been seen talking with the police officer a lot lately. Her tone was casual, but her eyes weren't. "He's everywhere in town," I said quickly. "Hard not to." She raised an eyebrow. "You sure that's all?" "Emily, I'm just asking." She cut in, voice low, tight. "Because lately you smile at your phone when no one's texting. You shower before bed again. You used to only do that in the mornings." The words hung heavy between us. I wanted to protest, to swear nothing was happening. But part of me knew denial would sound too practiced. "I'm just trying to feel normal again," I said finally. She sighed, shaking her head. "I don't even know what that means anymore." Neither did I. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat in the living room staring out the window. The neighborhood was silent except for the hum of distant traffic. Somewhere, a patrol car rolled by, headlights briefly catching the frame of our porch before disappearing down the hill. I didn't know if it was him, but I wanted it to be. I leaned back on the couch, eyes half closed, and imagined the sound of his voice again. Hands on the wall. But this time there was no command in it. Only curiosity. I hated myself for thinking it, for wanting to know what it meant. But the truth was simple. I hadn't felt seen in years. And somehow this stranger, this man, had looked right at me once and seen more than my wife ever did. The next morning, I caught sight of him again. On duty near the intersection outside my office. The light turned red, and as I waited, he looked over from the crosswalk. Our eyes met for barely a heartbeat. He didn't smile. Neither did I. But the air between us felt like a secret. That week, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind drifted constantly to the memory of that small smile, the steady calm in his voice, the weight of everything we weren't saying. He never texted, never called, never crossed any line. And maybe that's what made it worse or better. Couldn't decide. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't what's said. It's what's left unsaid. He never said a thing out of line. But sometimes silence says too much. The rain started before sunset. A slow whisper against the windshield that grew into a steady drumming by the time I hit the highway. The wipers thumped back and forth, barely keeping up. I was halfway between the office and home when the engine sputtered. A red light blinked on the dashboard check engine. I cursed under my breath, easing the car to the shoulder. The world outside blurred into streaks of gray. The rain was relentless, soaking through my jacket the second I stepped out. I popped the hood, pretending I knew what I was looking for. I didn't. The smell of wet asphalt filled the air. My phone had 1 bar of signal. I called roadside assistance, but the hold music mocked me with tinny optimism. I hung up. Then headlights appeared in the mirror, approaching slow, cautious. Cruiser. My chest tightened before I even saw his face. The patrol car stopped behind me, lights flashing faint red and blue through the rain. The door opened, and out stepped Officer Cole Matthews. Hat pulled low, rain darkening his uniform. The same calm silhouette I'd seen in my mind too many nights since that first stop. "Need some help?" he called over the rain. I exhaled, half in relief, half in something else. "Guess you're gonna start thinking I plan these run-ins." He smiled barely, but it was there. "If you're trying to get attention, it's working." He leaned under the hood, flashlight in hand, the beam catching drops of water like scattered glass. "Battery's fine. Might be your alternator. You're not getting home in this." "Story of my life," I muttered. He glanced at me, then shut the hood. "Come on, I'll give you a ride." For a second, pride made me hesitate. But the rain was too heavy, the night too empty. "You sure?" He nodded toward the cruiser. "Yeah, it's either that or pneumonia." The inside of the car smelled faintly of coffee and leather. The heater hummed low, fog gathering at the corners of the windows. We drove in silence at first. The windshield blurred with rivulets of rain, and I watched them chase each other down the glass. He finally spoke. "Rough week." I huffed out a laugh. "You could say that." "She giving you a hard time?" The question wasn't intrusive, just knowing. "Hard time," I said quietly. "Hard everything. We don't even fight properly anymore. Just live around each other." He nodded slowly, eyes on the road. "I get that. You do." He hesitated, then said, "Yeah, my ex and I, well, that ended a while back. He couldn't handle the job, the hours, the public part of it." He paused, exhaling. "Or maybe he couldn't handle me being honest about who I was." The words landed with a quiet weight. "He?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Yeah." His tone didn't change, didn't defend. Wasn't a secret, but small towns remember things longer than they should. I nodded, staring at the rain-slick road. "Guess honesty's never cheap." "No," he said softly, "but the alternative costs more." The road curved, lights flickering through the fog. The silence between us was different now, heavier, but not uncomfortable. I could feel his presence even when he wasn't looking at me. The steadiness, the calm. It made the air feel warmer. By the time we reached my street, the rain had softened to a mist. My porch light glowed faintly through the haze. He pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. The heater clicked off with a final sigh. Neither of us moved. I could hear the ticking of the cooling engine, the rhythm of rain against the roof. My hand rested on the door handle, but I didn't open it. "Thanks for the ride," I said, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "Anytime." The word lingered. I turned slightly, and in the half-light of the dashboard, his face was closer than I realized, quiet, unreadable. "I should probably," I started. But then he reached out. Not sudden, not forward. Just a hand on my shoulder, fingers resting lightly through the fabric of my wet jacket. It wasn't a move. It was an instinct, something protective, almost apologetic. I froze. Every sound dulled except my own heartbeat. He searched my eyes, rainwater still clinging to his lashes. "Ryan," he said softly, "you deserve peace, whatever that looks like." The way he said it, not pity, not judgment, made something inside me unclench. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt seen. He pulled back, the touch gone as quickly as it came. But the absence of it burned more than the contact had. I nodded, swallowing the words I couldn't say. "Good night, Cole." "Good night," he murmured, and then he was gone. Tail lights disappearing into the mist. I stood on the porch long after the sound of the engine faded. The rain was cool against my face, but my skin still felt warm where his hand had been. Inside, the house was dark. Emily was asleep on the couch, the TV still flickering silently across her face. I turned it off and went upstairs. In bed, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint drip of water from the eaves. My heart wouldn't settle. It wasn't guilt, not exactly. It was clarity. I realized I hadn't been craving danger or rebellion. I'd been craving connection, the kind that listens, the kind that stays, And in one brief touch, he'd shown me what that could feel like. 3 days passed before I saw him again. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just kindness mistaken for something more. But my mind betrayed me, replaying every word, every pause, every breath between us. By the third day, I couldn't take the stillness at home anymore. I went to the gym, hoping to lose myself in noise and sweat. The place was half empty, mirrors fogged from humidity. I was finishing my set when I saw him across the room, standing by the weight rack in a dark gray t-shirt, earbuds out, towel slung over his shoulder. He saw me almost immediately. A small nod, recognition, no surprise. I walked over before I could talk myself out of it. "Didn't expect to see you here," I said, trying for casual. He smiled faintly. "Gotta stay in shape. Comes with the badge." There was a pause. The hum of machines filled the silence between words. "About that night," I started, then stopped. He shook his head. "You don't have to explain. I know. I just keep thinking about what you said." He looked at me, really looked. I meant it. We stood there, two men surrounded by noise, saying everything without saying it. When I turned to grab a towel, our hands brushed. A fleeting, accidental touch, but it hit harder than it should have. The warmth of it pulsed through me, small, electric. He didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. Then, quietly, he said, "Take care of yourself, Ryan." "I'm trying," I whispered. He nodded once, eyes steady, and walked away, leaving me standing there with my pulse in my throat. That night, I drove home with the windows down, letting the cool air hit my face. The rain had cleared, the stars breaking through in patches. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt scared. But all I felt was alive, as if some part of me that had been buried under years of pretending had finally stirred. Cole hadn't crossed a line. Not really. But I had, inside myself. And once you realize what you've been missing, it's impossible to go back to pretending it doesn't exist. He hadn't kissed me. He hadn't even asked to. But somehow, in that quiet space between rain and breath, we both knew something had changed. The line wasn't spoken, but it was there, drawn, crossed, and waiting for whatever came next. Small towns have a way of noticing things that were never anyone's business to begin with. It started with whispers, the kind that float across coffee counters and barbershop chairs. People had seen me around Officer Matthews, the diner, the fundraiser, the gym. Each sighting added its own exaggeration, and before long, the story had a life of its own. By the time it reached Emily, it wasn't a rumor anymore. It was a headline carved in stone. I came home late one evening after work. The house lights were on, too bright, too deliberate. Emily sat at the kitchen table, both hands folded like she was waiting for a confession. Her phone lay in front of her, screen lit. I could see the message thread, a photo someone had taken at the fundraiser weeks ago. Cole and me, side by side, laughing about something small and harmless. "Want to explain this?" she asked. My throat went dry. "Explain what?" "You tell me." Her voice cracked, part anger, part disbelief. "Half the town thinks you've found a new hobby. Officer Matthews, right? The cop who pulled you over." "It's not. Don't you dare tell me it's nothing." She stood so suddenly her chair scraped against the tile. "You've been distant for months, Ryan. Now it all makes sense." "It doesn't," I said quickly. "It's not what you think." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what everyone's been whispering." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Emily, he's a friend. That's all." "Since when do you have friends I don't know about?" Her hands shook as she gestured toward the phone. "You barely talk to your coworkers, but somehow you've got time to bond with a cop every other day?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because what could I say? That she was right and wrong at the same time? That I hadn't cheated, not in body, but something deeper in me had already crossed a line? She stared at me, eyes searching, waiting for the lie I usually gave. But this time I couldn't force it out. Silence settled between us, heavy, undeniable. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Oh my God. It's true, isn't it?" I swallowed hard. I don't know what true means anymore. I'm confused. I didn't plan this. Something just shifted. Shifted. She recoiled like I'd slapped her. Do you hear yourself? You're married to me, Ryan. You made vows. I know. Then what the hell are you doing? I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the words clawing up my throat. I don't know. For the first time in years, someone looked at me and saw me. Not who I was supposed to be, just me. Her face twisted, grief turning to disgust. That's sick. You need help. The words landed like stones. Before I could speak, she grabbed her keys. I can't look at you right now. Emily, please. But the door slammed before I finished. The sound echoed through the empty hallway like a gunshot. I sank to the kitchen floor. My hands covered my face, and for a moment I didn't know if I was crying from guilt or relief. Maybe both. Outside, rain had started again, soft and constant. It sounded like forgiveness I didn't deserve. Hours passed that way. I don't remember standing up or walking out, but eventually, I found myself sitting beside my car on the curb, soaked and shivering. Headlights appeared, cutting through the mist. Patrol car slowed, then stopped. I didn't need to see the nameplate to know who it was. Cole stepped out, his flashlight sweeping briefly before he saw me. His voice was calm, careful. Ryan. I tried to laugh, but it came out broken. Guess I've made your rounds more exciting lately. He walked closer, the rain plastering his hair to his forehead. You shouldn't be out here like this. Where else should I be? I asked. Inside, pretending I still fit in a life that doesn't make sense? He crouched beside me, resting his elbows on his knees. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Just the sound of rain on asphalt, soft and steady. He finally said, I heard about the rumors. Everyone has. I muttered. I'm sorry. I looked at him, really looked. His eyes held no judgment, no pity, just understanding. You don't owe me an apology, I said. He shook his head slowly. Maybe not, but you don't owe anyone one either. Not for being honest. The words should have comforted me, but instead they tore something open. Honest, I echoed. You think this is honesty? I ruined my marriage. My wife thinks I stopped myself before the word could spill out. Cole's tone stayed steady. You didn't ruin anything. You just stopped pretending. That hit too close. I stood abruptly, stepping away. Don't say that. You don't know what it's like. He rose too, calm as ever. You're right. I don't know what it's like to be you. But I know what it's like to wake up every day feeling wrong in your own life. To wish the world would stop asking you to be someone you're not. His words cut through the rain. Don't, I whispered. Please, Cole. Just don't make this harder. He took a slow breath, rain dripping from his collar. I'm not trying to make it harder. I'm trying to tell you that you're allowed to stop running. I met his eyes, and for the first time I saw not the uniform, not the authority, just the man. The man who had pulled me over months ago, who had seen something in me before I even recognized it myself. But I couldn't bear it. I shook my head, stepping back. You should go. Ryan. Please. I can't do this right now. He watched me for a long moment, rain blurring the space between us. Then he nodded, slow and sad. All right, he said quietly. But I'll be here when you're ready to stop running. He turned, walked back to the cruiser, and drove away. The sound of the engine faded into the night, leaving only the rain. I stayed there until the clouds began to thin and dawn broke faintly over the rooftops. The sky was washed out blue, fragile, like it hadn't decided what kind of day it wanted to be. I didn't know either. When I finally went inside, the house felt too clean, too silent, like it had already forgotten I lived there. Emily's suitcase was gone from the closet. Her mug still sat in the sink. I leaned against the counter, staring at the steam rising from the kettle I'd left on. My reflection in the window looked like someone halfway erased. That morning I called in sick. Then I just sat at the table, watching the rain fade to sunlight. I thought about Cole's words. You don't owe anyone an apology for being honest. But honesty, I was learning, could destroy just as easily as it could heal. Still, deep down, beneath the guilt and fear, something small and quiet stirred, the faintest pulse of relief. Because for the first time in my adult life, the story being told about me, twisted as it was, wasn't entirely false. It was, in its painful way, a version of the truth. And maybe, when the noise settled and the whispers died, I'd find out what that truth was supposed to mean. For now, I just let the silence fill the house. It was loud enough to drown out everything else. The weeks after Emily left passed in fragments. The sound of moving boxes scraping against the floor, the echo of doors closing behind me, the hollow quiet of a new apartment that didn't yet feel like mine. I signed the lease on a place across town, small and half-furnished. It had creaking pipes, a window that whistled in the wind, and a kitchen counter that slanted just enough for coffee mugs to slide if I wasn't careful. But it was mine, every imperfect inch of it. The silence was different here. Not empty, just waiting. I didn't see Cole again. Not in person. But I saw his patrol car, sometimes parked by the bridge, sometimes idling near the grocery store. The sight of those headlights in the distance stirred something between comfort and ache. I'd tell myself I wasn't avoiding him, but the truth was I was. Every part of me wanted to see him again, but I didn't know how to face the person I'd been the last time we spoke. Half drowning, half hiding. So I stayed busy instead. Work became mechanical. Therapy, a word that used to sound like defeat, became the only hour of the week where I actually spoke the truth. My therapist, a calm man with kind eyes and a clock that never ticked too loud, asked questions I'd spent years avoiding. About childhood, about expectations, about how long I'd been living someone else's version of happy. One day he asked, "When did you first feel like you were pretending?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "Maybe always." It was strange. Saying it out loud didn't make me weaker. It made me lighter. One night after a long day, I found myself back at May's Diner, the same booth where I'd first seen Cole out of uniform. The waitress recognized me now. She poured my coffee without asking and smiled in that polite, practiced way people in small towns do when they're trying not to bring up gossip. The bell over the door jingled behind me. I didn't look up until I heard his voice. "Still taking your coffee, Black?" My stomach flipped. Cole stood there. Plain clothes this time, gray shirt, dark jeans. No badge, no authority between us. Just him. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual and failing. "Hey." He nodded toward the opposite seat. "Mind if I sit?" I gestured to the booth. "You never needed permission before." He smiled faintly as he slid into the seat. For a few moments, neither of us said much. The hum of the ceiling fan filled the quiet. "How've you been?" he asked finally. "Better," I said, still figuring out what that word means. He nodded, stirring his coffee even though he hadn't added sugar. "I get that." We talked about small things, the weather, work, the new speed limit sign they'd installed near the high school. It felt ordinary, and yet every word carried the weight of everything we hadn't said for weeks. Then he looked up, meeting my eyes. "I heard you moved out." "Yeah. Signed the papers last week." "I'm sorry," he said softly. I shook my head. "Don't be. I think it's the first real choice I've made in a long time." He leaned back, studying me for a moment. "You look different." I laughed quietly. "Older." "No," he said. "Freer." The word caught me off guard. I stared down at my hands, the faint tremor in my fingers easing. I still wake up sometimes expecting to feel the same guilt. But it's quieter now. Less sharp. "That's how it fades," he said. "It never disappears completely, but it stops owning you." His voice had a steadiness I'd come to rely on, not commanding anymore, just grounding. For the first time since the night in the rain, I felt calm sitting across from him. No guilt, no rush, no fear of being seen. Just presence. We talked for over an hour. About honesty. About loneliness. About what it means to stop apologizing for who you are. I told him about therapy, about how strange it felt to be rebuilding myself from the inside out. He listened quietly, never interrupting. At some point, The conversation drifted into silence. Not awkward, peaceful. The kind of silence that feels like a conversation all on its own. The diner had emptied out. The waitress turned off the neon open sign in the window, and the reflection of the streetlight stretched across the tabletop. Cole looked thoughtful, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "You know," he said finally, "I've replayed that night 100 times. The stop, the rain, the way you looked at me." I smiled faintly. "I was terrified." "Yeah," he said softly, "but not of me." He glanced out the window, then back at me. "That night, I didn't step back because I saw a man who needed someone to stay." The words settled in the space between us like warmth spreading through cold air. I didn't know what to say. For once, I didn't need to. We sat there, two men who had spent years hiding behind roles, husband, officer, son, finally speaking without titles, without masks. The clock above the counter ticked past midnight before either of us moved. When we finally stood to leave, he offered to walk me to my car. The air outside was crisp, clean after a light drizzle. At the door, he hesitated. "You know where to find me," he said. "I know. And next time," he added, eyes soft, "don't wait for another breakdown to call." I smiled. "I'll try." He gave a short nod, turned toward his truck, and disappeared into the quiet street. Driving home, I kept thinking about how strange it felt to breathe without shame. I wasn't healed. I wasn't fixed. But I was honest. Finally, painfully, honestly me. The rain began again as I parked outside my apartment. I sat there for a while, listening to it tap against the windshield, gentle, rhythmic, familiar. Every memory came back like flashes of film. The blue lights in my rearview mirror, the night at the diner, the storm on the highway, the way he'd said my name, not as an order but as recognition. All of it leading here. I stepped out of the car, the rain washing over me like absolution. Inside, the apartment felt less empty than usual. The coffee mug on the counter, the faint smell of rain on my clothes, small things that made the space feel lived in. I caught my reflection in the dark window. Same face, same eyes, but not the same man. I whispered, "I'm done running." And for the first time, I believed it. By spring, my apartment had learned the rhythm of me. The plants by the window had stopped dying. The clock above the stove ticked softly instead of accusingly. I'd hung a few photographs. Not of people, but of places that felt like breathing. The lake at dawn, the diner sign against a pink sky, the quiet road where headlights once stopped me. I still woke early most days, made coffee, and let sunlight spill across the floorboards. It was the kind of peace I never thought I'd earn. Not loud, not perfect, but honest. Therapy continued, but I needed it less like rescue now and more like reflection. I'd learned how to sit with my own silence, how to forgive it. Every now and then, I thought about Cole not with ache anymore, but with warmth. He'd become a part of the story that had rewritten me. Sometimes I'd see his patrol car pass through downtown and feel a quiet gratitude instead of longing. I didn't chase it. And then one evening, months after that last talk at the diner, someone knocked on my door. It was soft, 3 knocks, deliberate but hesitant. When I opened it, he was standing there. Not in uniform. No badge, no brimmed hat, no distance. Just Cole, in a faded flannel shirt and jeans, hair slightly longer, eyes a little softer. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I echoed, heartbeat already a half second ahead of me. Didn't think cops did door-to-door visits. He smiled. "I'm off duty." Then come in before the neighbors start another rumor. That earned a small laugh. He stepped inside, and for a moment, the air shifted, the faint scent of rain and cologne threading through the quiet. We didn't rush into conversation. He looked around the apartment, nodding at the bookshelves, the framed photos. "You've made this place yours," he said. "I'm trying." He turned toward me, hands in his pockets. "You look good, Ryan." "So do you," I said before I could stop myself. A flicker of something, amusement, maybe something deeper, crossed his face. "I almost didn't come," he admitted. "Why?" He took a slow breath. "I put in for a transfer a few weeks ago. Another district closer to my folks. But I couldn't leave without seeing you one more time. The words hung there like a door half open. I felt a strange pull in my chest, the kind that mixes gratitude with sadness. You don't owe me that, I said quietly. I know, he replied. That's not why I'm here. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one that used to feel too big for one person. Now it didn't. Conversation came easy. We talked about simple things first. Work, the diner, the new mayor, how winter had been kinder this year. Then the talk turned slower, more personal. He asked, You still driving those back roads at night? Not anymore, I said, smiling faintly. I found other ways to clear my head. He nodded. Good. I always worried you'd end up in a ditch somewhere. Yeah, I said. Guess you've been saving me longer than I realized. That got a quiet laugh from him. Then silence again, the kind that felt safe now. He looked down at his coffee, then back at me. Do you remember that first night? How could I forget? I told you to put your hands on the wall, he said softly. I think about that sometimes. How it must have felt. Terrifying, I said. Then, after a pause, but not because of you. He met my gaze, and the years of restraint in both of us seemed to thin in that moment. I've replayed that night too, I admitted. Not the warning, not the stop, just the way you looked at me like you saw something I didn't. He gave a small, knowing smile. Maybe I did. Outside, the sun was setting, gold bleeding into blue. The light through the curtains made the room feel softer, almost suspended in time. He leaned forward slightly, his voice lower. You seem at peace now. I am, I said. Mostly. I'm not hiding anymore. Good, he murmured. You deserve that. The way he said it, the same tone from that night in the rain, pulled something loose inside me. I stood, suddenly restless, walking toward the window. You know what's strange? I said. I used to think freedom meant running away. Now it just means standing still and not apologizing for it. He rose too, moving quietly until he was a step behind me. Standing still's harder than people think. Yeah, I whispered. It is. I turned. He was closer than I expected. Not imposing, just present. His eyes searched mine, not for permission, but for truth. I gave a small nod, the kind you give when you're done being afraid. He reached out, fingers brushing the side of my face, tentative but sure. His hand was warm, steady, grounding. And then he kissed me. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't desperate. It was quiet, the kind of kiss that comes after years of holding your breath. A simple truth spoken in touch. The world outside the window blurred. There was no guilt left in it. Only calm, and the soft realization that maybe peace had always looked like this. When we finally parted, he rested his forehead against mine. I should have done that a long time ago, he said softly. No, I whispered. It happened exactly when it was supposed to. Later, we moved to the balcony with fresh coffee. The city hummed faintly below. Cars, laughter. The wind through early summer leaves. He sat beside me, legs stretched out, eyes tracing the horizon. You know, he said, when I joined the force, I thought duty was about control. Turns out, it's mostly about patience. I smiled. And you've got plenty of that. He chuckled. You've tested it. I'm aware. The laughter faded into a quiet that didn't need filling. We watched the sun slip beneath the skyline, painting everything in gold and gray. He turned to me. You think you'll stay here? For now, I said. I like the quiet. He nodded. Maybe I'll stick around a little longer too. Thought you were transferring. He shrugged. Paperwork can wait. I looked at him then, really looked. The man who had once been a stranger behind flashing lights, who'd walked into my life with order and walked out leaving clarity. For the first time, I didn't feel small under his gaze. I felt equal, seen. We clinked our coffee mugs together like a silent toast. To what? He asked. To peace, I said. And whatever comes next. The night deepened around us. The stars came out in cautious handfuls, the kind that appear one at a time as if testing the air. He leaned back, eyes closed, the faintest smile on his lips. You ever think about how we got here? All the time, I said. Would you change it? I shook my head. Not a second of it. Even the bad parts. Especially the bad parts. He opened his eyes, looked at me again. Steady, open, proud. You're not the same man I pulled over that night. I know, I said quietly. He was still pretending to be someone worth arresting. He smiled at that. A small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. When he finally stood to leave, it wasn't goodbye. He lingered by the door, hand on the frame. If I don't transfer, he said, I might stop by again sometime. Maybe with less coffee, more dinner. I'll hold you to that, I said. He started to walk out, then turned back. That night, when I told you to put your hands on the wall, I didn't mean to scare you. You didn't, I said. You just stopped me from running too fast. He nodded once, the corner of his mouth lifting. Good night, Ryan. Good night, Cole. When the door closed, the apartment didn't feel empty. It felt full of everything that had taken years to find. Quiet, truth, and something close to love. I stood there a while, watching the streetlights flicker through the window, tracing their glow across the walls. Then, softly, to no one in particular, I said, that night, he told me to put my hands on the wall. I thought it was the end of my freedom. Turns out, it was the start of finally being seen. The words felt lighter this time. Not a confession, but a promise. The kind that doesn't need to be kept to anyone else. Just to yourself.